Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Christian Boucousis. Boo is a former fighter pilot and the CEO of Afterburner, a global leadership company that has worked with over 3,500 organizations and has trained more than 2 million professionals all around the world. He's also the author of a great book called The Afterburner Advantage. And as you're watching this conversation today, you can tell he's come prepared in uniform. Boo, it's great to see you. Welcome to the show.
Joe, it's an absolute pleasure being here. Thank you so much for having me on the show.
If I had a flight suit, I would definitely wear that to the podcast.
Yeah. Look, you skirt a very fine line between high school quarterback and wearing a flight suit when you haven't flown for 20 years. But yeah, look, it's just a visual representation of a very deep story that has a lot of value for leaders today.
And you spent years as a fighter pilot. How long were you in the service?
I would have been in the Air Force for 11 years. I was a fighter pilot for probably 9 of those, if you include the training. And then I was discharged medically with an autoimmune disease, which meant I could no longer be a fighter pilot. And that started a journey 22 years ago into business.
So much of the work that you do is bringing sort of fighter pilot mindset and mentality to the business world. So what do you wish more people knew?
I wish people knew how to be flawless leaders.
Do you think that there is such a thing to be flawless? It sounds like we're calling for perfection.
So when we call it flawless leadership, what we're really saying there is it's just a dream to be perfect. It's never going to happen. But if we look at a flawless leader, and a flawless leader is someone that's driven by impact, and to be impactful, you need to be destination focused. It means you have to be very, what most people would call goal oriented, but I don't like that word because subconsciously goals are nice to achieve. They're not essential. I prefer how fighter pilots think, which is it's essential to hit the target, essential to achieve an objective. So flawless is establishing that destination, which is, I'm not going to be perfect, but I'm going to give it a good go. I am going to try and get as close to the perfect outcome I can. And that's benchmarked against fairly open public source data around fighter pilot success rates, which hover around the 99% mark. Every mission we go out, we achieve 99%. That's what flawless is. It's a journey, and it's a pursuit of a level of performance that we convince ourselves we're not even capable of before we walk out the door.
So help us apply that in the business context, because I think most leaders would be thrilled if they hit 99% of their targets. So what does this look like in practice?
Well, first of all, no one believes that, right? That's the problem. No one believes that what's currently going on in the business can be better than what it already is. And that's what we call a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is really saying we could be anything. And we just got to commit to the iterative process of gradually getting a little bit better each and every day. So when we come into businesses, they're traditionally run through hierarchy models. They're generally relationship driven, highly political. And as a result of that, a lot of the decision-making and data is perception-based, not reality-based. So when we look at an organization in terms of how does it operate, it operates in accordance with what it believes. What it believes is really based on the biases that the leaders bring into that organization. So the challenge for any organization, not just business or any human, is to say to yourself that what I am now is what it is, but it's not who I could be or what we could be.
Okay, so it's this mindset and this orientation towards learning and a shift from being perfect to making progress. And I think what you said earlier was important. If you don't have a destination in mind, you can never arrive. So to have that target so clearly defined is really the first step in all of this. Help us understand a little bit more about this mindset of mistakes are data, and it's just the first step in our process. How does that play out in this work?
Well, we invest in what we value. And in most organizations, they don't value mistakes. It's the complete opposite. So if we don't value a mistake, then clearly we're not going to talk about it, right? Whereas as a fighter pilot, you're taught that the mistakes and the errors are highly valuable, not just for you, but because it's probably going to save someone else's life, or it's going to help us as an organization, as a team, do a better job against that threat next time. So the mistake is inevitable. And if you frame a leader as your job is to take people into the unknown and to grow them along the way, you're always dealing with the unknown. So mistake is even the wrong word. I mean, A mistake is just, that's how we define the reality of what happened versus what we thought would happen. It's not just a mistake, it's just different. And when it's just different, we can do something about it. We can iterate from that, because it's not until an idea or an assumption gets executed that we know what it means in the real world. And if we avoid the effect of the real world of our ideas, our strategy, or our destinations, then we're doomed to just get stuck in a world full of assumptions. And you understand, human beings, we tend to over exaggerate negativity, right? We're biased towards negativity. So if we have one mistake, we assume all that's going to happen from here is more mistakes, which is correct in some ways. You are going to learn more along the way. But sometimes when you use that word learning, there's a negative connotation. People think learning is school, and that school wasn't very good. And then, I don't know how to learn. I just prefer using growth, because growth is something that we can all do. And the uncomfortable part of that is saying, what was my role in that mistake? What was my role in things not working out how we thought they would achieve? We start to really embrace fighter pilot thinking, which is all grounded in debriefing and iteration. What we start to see is the stuff that didn't go to plan was either the plan or the execution. So fix one of those two things, and next time it gets better.
It's just data that, and if you look at it as data and data points, those don't have the weight of mistake attached to them, but still have the opportunity for improvement and growth.
Yeah. And if you're constantly looking at data without the context of the data, then everything always looks bad. Because again, the way we frame data when we see a data set is negatively. That's how we walk into that conversation. But when we come at it aspirationally, which is, hey, where we're going, this is just a temporary time and space here where it's not quite where we want it to be. Let's just keep iterating it, moving it forwards.
So these debriefs are critical to making those improvements and reaching our destination. Walk us through what those debriefs would look like for a leader. When are they happening? How often are they happening? When should a leader use them? Are there certain situations when it makes more sense to debrief than others? Help us better understand what that looks like in practice.
I would have answered that question differently 3 years ago. And 3 years ago, I had an experience with another fighter pilot. We walked into a cafe, and there were 5 people waiting and 5 people working. And it took 10 minutes for a coffee. And we sat down and we're like, why did that take 10 minutes? And we just naturally fell into a debrief of what they could have done better, we observed. And then we laughed and we said, what is it about fighter pilots that we're always looking at everything as if it can be a bit better? So when we talk about debriefing, we have to look at it from 2 perspectives. One is it's actually a mindset. It's a cognitive model. And 2, it's a ritual. It's a thing that you do. And what I kind of came to the realization of 3 years ago was actually debriefing as a structured way of working after every mission actually programmed me a certain way where I debrief everything. Everything in life is, what's the point? How's it going? Why is it not there yet? What can we do about it? Whether it's my wife, my son, my kids, whether it's working with my team, it's hyper vigilant around when I feel like we can be so much more. I feel like we're not there yet. So what's the problem? And that's when you go, oh, let's do a debrief. And debriefs when you start to bring everyone into the room. So the people that are involved in the execution. And that's important. Only the people involved in the execution, not the boss, not the people on the outside, the people that actually did the work. Because the minute you bring someone in who's not on the job, it brings a bias into the conversation. So when we debrief, I say there's a few triggers. If you're having a meeting in a company, that's a debrief. Because what are you really doing in a meeting? You're updating. You're trying to figure out what happened last week. So bring some structure to that. Just say what was meant to happen last week, what actually happened, why did that happen, and what are we going to do this week that's different? And we shift that unstructured reflection and we bring intentionality to it. I call it intentional reflection. And our debrief method is called ORCA, ORCA. What's the objective? What's the result? What's the cause? And what's the action? That's it. Only 4 steps. So from what you do, it's very easy. The hard part is being honest with yourself. The hard part is admitting that, oh, I did something that contributed to this. So if you're having a meeting, consider it a debrief. If you're frustrated, that should be an immediate trigger for a debrief. And what you will find is you'll start to get this daily practice of debriefing instead of just talking. And you'll see that meeting times will start reducing from an hour to about 15 minutes. And then all of a sudden, all of the conflicting elements of today's business, all the reactivity, the knee jerking just starts to slow down. And we start to operate from being across each other into sort of trending in the same direction. And the best way to grow is not to be told how to grow, it's to observe it in others and to be held accountable as a peer group. So we call that nameless and rankless. So when we debrief, we're all equal. Doesn't matter whether you're the boss in the hierarchy, but when it comes to everyone being in service to the objective, we're all equal in that room. We can call out poor leadership traits. We can call out broken systems in the business. But most importantly, we just call out our personal execution of what we thought we had to do versus what we actually did.
And when you make this shift, it really seems to remove the ego and the blame from a lot of these conversations that typically involve a lot of finger pointing instead of pointing forward. That can be hard. What are some things that leaders can do to normalize this shift, especially if it's not currently part of their practice?
So it just starts with one leader. One leader asking a very simple question is, what are we trying to achieve here? When the work's done, where do we arrive? And that's the objective. Then being the first person to put their hand up and say, hey, I didn't really give very good direction here. I didn't involve you guys in the process of planning this. I was way too optimistic here. So what I need to do is reset my expectation. And this is what it looks like now. This is my action. And then all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, wow, I just watched the boss admit to a mistake and they took accountability and they're committed to doing something. And in the next debrief, guess what? They would have done it because that's what leadership is. Do what you say. And then everyone's going to see the effect of that and they're going to have a win. Most of leadership these days is creating compensation structures because of an absence of winning. We're just dealing with people that exist each and every day. And if you just exist in a day, you're not aware of a day, it's a much harder day to get through. So this ability to bring awareness to the conversations is through that simple 4-step process is how you get the ball rolling. It can be messy. You can make mistakes. It doesn't matter. But if your intention is give everyone a voice, focus on the facts, and we're not going to get bogged down in what we did wrong, we're going to focus on what we do tomorrow, you're in a pretty good shape to start embedding this sort of mindset in the business.
The book is The Afterburner Advantage, and the author, and he helped this conversation take flight today, is Boucousis. Boo, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Thank you, Joe. It's been a pleasure.